بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا بهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ولعنة الله الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بفاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين بنت محمد المصطفى.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. When we look at the character of Lady Fatima, the illustrious, and we look at the noble character of Lady Khadija, it becomes imperative upon us to inquire about the status of women and about the instructions that Quran gave about women and the rights of women. And at the same time, look at the criticisms facing the Muslim community regarding the unequal rights of women and status of women, and what has gone wrong when Islam was so liberating, empowering to women to the extent that the Orientalists write that the first person to institutionalize the rights of women in a Bedouin community that has no understanding of rights or sanctity for human life or morality or dignity was the Prophet of Islam. And this is being stated by non-Muslims. So what has gone wrong that a religion that is so liberating can actually be questioned in terms of the system of rights that it gives for women? Now, if you look at the lady Fatima Salamullah alayha, you will see that Ali ibn Abi Talib says to her, "You will find me obedient." She's a very forceful personality, very resilient, very resolved in doing what was the right thing to do. In fact, for the Prophet to call her Abiha, the mother of her father, shows that actually she was not only somebody who was caring for the Prophet in a motherly manner, but she was the pillar of his strength. If we look at what transpired after the death of the Prophet, we will see that Lady Fatima was like a mountain. She was unmovable, unshakable, to the extent that we find a lot of historians saying that Ali ibn Abi Talib loses his own resolve at the death of Fatima Salamullah alayha. Now you find a lady like this, and you find her mother, Lady Khadija, the way in which they were, it becomes difficult to understand how people can feel that the status of women was inferior to that of a man. In one of the places, as we go into this subject, when, thank you so much, God bless you. Salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
As we will go into it later on, we find that she is such a towering figure that is impossible to see how she can be inferior in any way to any man. And similarly, Lady Khadija. But in one place you find that Imam Ali, and we will narrate this towards the end, says to Lady Fatima, "But I am requesting of you." And she says to him, "Well, if you are requesting of me, and if you have already taken a decision, then you shall find me obedient to your decision." He has such mutual respect that Imam Ali has for Lady Fatima, and Fatima has for Imam Ali. So it's difficult to imagine how the status of women is inferior to man, seeing that the role model of women, Lady Khadija and Lady Fatima, are such exemplary models, and who are unshakable, who are no less than any man in that community. When we look at this and we examine Islam, we come out with certain truths that the Muslims need to remind themselves of, how glorious this religion has been. For example, If you look at the law of divorce within the Quran, it will say that the man has a right to do talaq, to give talaq from the sunnah of Hazrat Ismail. It's been coming. But at the same time, Surah Baqarah says, and if both of them feel comfortable, then there is no problem. فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا فِي مَفْتَدَتْ بِهِ, that there is no problem upon both of them if she gives back her mahar and she can take her divorce. There was always for a woman there was always a right for a divorce for a woman. So now when we find that the Islamic law is being explained as unfair, that the woman does not have a right to divorce, all we need to do is we need to remind ourselves that how is this possible? For example, the Quran gives her the right to take a divorce at will. Imam Sadiq, accompanying literature to this verse is Imam Sadiq's hadith, in which he states that if a woman says to a man that you will not find me obedient to you, you will not find me compliant to you, then in that case, the man should let her go and let her give her mahriya back, and man should let her go. That's the end of story. This is how simple it was. Something has gone wrong somewhere that we need to remind ourselves of. Here is what I want to say. When we look at these role models and then we examine the law of the Quran, the mistake that is being made is that we see that the Muslim identity is connected with social laws. It is not. If we look at the Muslim identity, it is connected with the spiritual system that Islam was giving. If you look at the Quran says, you have your manasik, they have their manasik. You have your direction, they have their direction. I have given everybody shir'atan wa minhaja. I have given everybody their sharia and their path. But your identity is actually connected with your sense of spirituality. You pray 5 times a day. You perform hajj. You fast in a particular manner. You face a particular direction. Your ceremonies give you your identity, the social norms, the contracts, the social interaction, the muamalat, as we call them within the Islamic law system. They are not giving identity. Identity is given by the spiritual instructions. The devotional aspects that the Quran gives form the identity of a Muslim. Otherwise, the Jews and the Christians of the time, and even the pagans, they had similar contractual systems. The talaq that we have in Islam is the one that the pagans used to practice from Hazrat Ismail. The khul'a that we have in Islam was for the first time institutionalized in the era of Jahiliyyah, and the Islam followed it. The contract system that we have already existed in the context in which the Prophet came. Those are not there to give us our identity. Those are things that are fleeting, fluctuating, changing all the time. The Quran merely came and modified them, tweaked them to ensure minimization of abuse and greater level of fair play. Have we ever wondered that the Quran never stipulates the age of bulugh? In the Quran, it talks about hulm. Yes? It talks about bulugh, but it never specifies an age. Similarly, the Quran never specifies the amount of zakat nor the items upon which zakat is to be given. Why is it? This in itself requires us to ask. Because the needs, let's talk about zakat, the needs of a growing state fluctuate and they change. If the Quran had fixed zakat on items, then those items today are non-existent within this environment. If the Quran were to have said zakat is on camels, yes, on livestock, on crop, in this part of the world, there would be no zakat. And what was the function of zakat anyway? It was a form of taxation, shrouded in spirituality, because everything about Islam is on the vertical axis. Vertical axis means individual and God. Every single thing that is worldly in Islam acquires spirituality. Ali ibn Abi Talib sallallahu alayhi says, give zakat. Give zakat with the intention of doing it for the sake of Allah, so you don't lose out on the thawab. But Even if you don't give it with the intention of doing it for Allah, it will still feed the poor, won't it? It will, won't it? Its function is attained. So zakat was a taxation system. Similarly, khums was a taxation system. But in any case, the Quran does not fix the items upon which zakat is to be given, nor the amount. Why? Because this, within the human community, is something that will always be in a state of flux. But the Muslim community will always be an ummah that faces Kaaba. We'll always pray 5 times a day. We'll always fast in the month of Ramadan. We'll always Assalamu alaikum. We'll always be God-centric in its speech. Inshallah, mashallah. It will always read the Quran as a form of devotion. That is what gave the Muslims their identity, not the muamalat. Similarly, the age of bulugh is not there to be found in the Quran. And hence, we have a hadith from Imam Sadiq that a girl becomes baligh at the age of 13, even though Janab Fatima Salamullah Alaiha married at the age of 9. From our hadith is she married at the age of 9, yes, or a little after 9. But by the time of Imam Sadiq, the lifestyle has changed. People are eating different fruits, different foods. It's an easier lifestyle. It's no longer a nomadic type of lifestyle. It is not a hostile desert environment anymore. They have become a civilization. They have become sophisticated. There is import of different foods, different lifestyle, comfort, so on and so forth, which pushes the age of bulugh higher. Physical menstruation and also the mental aptitude. And hence the Quran does not quote the age of bulugh. The age of bulugh does not determine the identity of a Muslim. This is what I'm trying to say here. The flaw that we are making here is that we see Islam as liberating everybody by giving rights, opportunities, equal standing to women. Think about this. Women did not have right to divorce, inherit, own within the rest of the world when Islam institutionalized it. Today the same Islam is being looked at as not giving proper rights to women. There's something that's gone wrong. In its own time, it's centuries ahead of its own time. After centuries, it's seen behind its own time. The reason the Muslims hesitate to address this question is because they feel it is inconsistent with the ethos of the Quran. It's not. The Quran never came to specify the muamalat or the actions, interactions, or the social law as the identity of a Muslim. Those were a necessity that the Quran had to address. They weren't the primary concern of the Quran, and hence no mention of the age of bulugh is there, no mention of the items of zakat are there. Now let us look at other verses. We find this, don't we, in Surah Baqarah, that retain 2 men if you want to bequeath, leave your last will. And if you can't find 2 men, then 1 man and 2 women. But have we ever read this verse accurately? Think about this carefully. That if one of them were to forget, then the other one can remind her. But if one were not to forget, then what's the use of the other one? Can you see that? So it means that the women's aptitudes were not as great as men's were back in the day, because they were being kept in a childlike fashion. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His Quran is assessing the strengths and the weaknesses of the community. And in accordance with the strengths and the weaknesses of the community, is setting out His law in a very pragmatic manner. The concern of God is accurate testimonials. If the accurate testimonials can be given by one woman, then there is no problem. This is the problem that Khalifa Abu Bakr had. He said to Lady Zahra, and we'll go into it afterwards, that bring another witness. Imam Ali at one point he said to Abu Bakr, you are becoming inconsistent with what the Prophet has said, that Fatima is Siddiqa. She's the truthful one. In her case, you don't need another woman. When you have this assurance that she never lies, she never forgets in her claim. So Imam Ali was actually reminding him that, look, you have failed to understand fully. This is a false claim that you're making from her, that she should bring another witness. But if we were to look at this verse, there is no law of 2 women to 1 man. In essence, the law is of accurate testimonial. And the aptitude that women normally had there was not the same as the one that man had. They were not accustomed to retaining knowledge because they were never educated. It was a very warring, if you look at Surah Nisa and study it carefully, it was a warring culture. Women were being inherited one after another. Yes? And children were being taken as orphans and their rights were being abused and their wealth was being seized. That was the hostile climate in which the Prophet came. He slowly, gradually empowered them, nurtured their souls, so on and so forth. So Islam, again, as we go into it, I repeat, gives identity through its spiritual teaching, not through its social regulations. There is no Islam in cutting off the hands and the limbs. That was merely there, a punitive way to stop crime. There was nothing to do with cutting hands. So when people say today the Islamic identity is contingent with cutting hands, then the marhum Imam Khomeini, Ridwanullah alayhi, he should not have advised the Iranian government that do not decapitate people's limbs. To be honest with you, look at how far Islam was. Phenomenal religion. Find me one verse in the Quran that talks about stoning anyone to death. There isn't any. In the Old Testament, you have stoning to death for almost everything you do. But Islam, the community has matured in respect of the dignity of human being. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have ennobled the son of Adam. This is below the dignity of the son of Adam that you stone them to death. And that one incident that we have of the Prophet stoning a couple to death, Ayatollah Muhakkik Damad has written a paper on this. He said several different accounts are given and they all stem from the same incident. It's only one incident and it's come through several different sources that this is what the Prophet did. Of course he argues against it in his own way, but my argument against it is this. That can you actually conceptualize this state that for the first time the Prophet of Islam is stoning somebody to death and the reporters are only one group of people. Something as great as this, shouldn't it have been reported by so many reporters that it becomes a continuous mutawatir report? How can it be a single narration, a khabarul wahid? It goes to show that these things might not have happened at all. This sort of way in which we are understanding Islam, that the identity of Islam is connected with decapitation and with killing and 9-year-old menstruation and maturity, so on and so forth. Now let's go into hijab. Another thing, the women, when the hijab was institutionalized, they rejoiced. They actually rejoiced. Today the women frown upon hijab. The ethos that hijab had back in the day and the one that it has today are totally different. Back in the day, when you find Surah Ahzab, you see in Surah Ahzab, the Prophet is told, tell the women to drape themselves with outer covers so that they may be recognized. Because women used to go and pray behind the Prophet in the mosque, their night prayers. Imagine, today we have this notion that a woman should pray in the chambers of her house. And that is more nearer to piety. Didn't the Prophet of Allah and the Quran know what was piety? The women used to go and pray in the Prophet's mosque, the night prayers, the Isha prayers, in darkness, and the morning prayers. En route to the mosque, the ruffians of Medina used to harass them, thinking that they were women of other sort of denominations and following. These women complained to the Prophet. They said, look, they are harassing us en route to the mosque. The Prophet did not tell them, go inside your houses and pray there. No. He said to the man, you better stop your actions. And then he said to the women, the Quran says to the women, now drape yourselves so they have no more excuse. They can recognize you. That you are women of this community and you are coming and praying behind me in the mosque. How phenomenal is this? And then in Surah An-Nur, when the verse of hijab came, actually, it gave women an equal social standing because no longer were men allowed to objectify women. The women were tired of this culture, that men were just using them. When for the first time Abu Sufyan heard the verse that women have equal standing before God in Islam, he was appalled. He said, you know, and Hind was there, but she was a very forceful woman. But despite that, he said, you know, we take women, we clothe them, shelter them, provide for them, use them, and we discard them. And he was laughing and mocking at the Prophet. But the women standing next to him did not find it a mockery. They were actually intrigued that, wow, is he saying something so outlandish as this? Then somebody says to Abu Sufyan that, no, this is not the only thing he says. He also says that slaves have rights in front of God that are equal to free men. And there's no distinction between a slave and a free man in terms of where they stand with God. He was appalled by this. This is what Islam was all about. That women who are being inherited, used and discarded, now in hijab, they have a status. They have a status that you cannot look at me in the eye and speak to me as I'm your property or an object. You will have to gaze down in awe and respect of me and then talk to me. And in fact, when you read that verse, the verse commands the man cast down your glances before it tells the women to cover. That they are not your objects to look at. Respect them, treat them with dignity. So the hijab actually gave them dignity. It liberated women. Then the Prophet said, you will not own women. In fact, they will have their own inheritance. And they will be provided for in addition to their inheritance. So when we look at Islam, we see phenomenal, centuries ahead of its own time. What has happened today is, unfortunately, we have taken the social reforms that Islam made as an end in themselves and as a point of identity. Whereas identity are the spiritual teachings of Islam. The way in which we act and interact is nothing to do with Islam in essence. That's a transient thing. The age of bulugh will change from one region to another, from one era to another. The age of intellectual maturity, the age of physical maturity, and in fact the Quran is very sensitive to this. It makes a distinction between physical maturity and rushd, mental maturity. It says in one place, do not give them their wealth until anastum minhum rushda, until you find that prudentiality from them, that they can actually govern their own wealth. Otherwise, don't give them their wealth, because the children who are not orphan, obviously their parents would not give them wealth. So Allah says to the orphans as well, even if they become baligh, until and unless they become prudential, don't give them their wealth, for they will waste it and squander it. So when we look at this problem, the problem is that actually we are taking as Islamic identity something that does not mark the Islamic identity. The Muslim identity is in its spirituality, is in its devotion, not in its muamalat. And especially when we look at Lady Zahra, Lady Khadija, Lady Zainab, we can say, how can it be true that a woman has this sort of a standing? What has happened today is that hijab carries sentiments that are totally alien to Islam. Lady Zahra used to teach. Lady Khadija was the empress of her time. But the notion of hijab today means seclusion and invisibility. If we look at the culture of the Christians and before them the Assyrians, we will find that the women were secluded, the respectable women were secluded. Even if you look at the depictions of Lady Mary, she's fully draped, isn't she? Salamullah alayha. And if you look at the Christian sort of dwellings, the previous ones, then you will find that the women are given quarters right at the back of the house, so that nobody can see them, nobody can hear them. These are the sentiments that we adopted later on. So now when we say, can a woman preside over a case? The answer is no, because she's supposed to be secluded. She can't become a qadi, for example. Can she become a mushrik marja? No, because she cannot interact freely with man. These are sentiments that are not there within the Quran. These are sentiments that are not there within the prophetic outlook. These are later influences that come in. Of course, our Imam Salamullah alayhim ajma'in used to explain what the rules and regulations were in accordance with the context in which they existed. What has happened is that something that is so liberating has been misunderstood, most unfortunately. Now, when we come to Lady Fatima, we just stated that she was very resolved in what she believed. She was unrelenting and resilient. Sometimes I wonder that when you look at Al-Hassan and Al-Hussain, salamullah alayhim, when you look at Lady Zainab, and when you look at that strength that she displays, where does that come from? And the answer, it does not come from Imam Ali, it actually comes from Lady Zahra. When we look at her history and the way in which she is during the time of the Prophet and in the aftermath of the Prophet, we find that she displays this character. She's extremely hurt, extremely wounded, but her hurt and her wound, the inner wound, is not for anything but for her personality. Because she has such a defined personality. She is so forceful in seeing through the truth that when people move away from it, it hurts her to no extent. So let us go through this. In the lifetime of the Prophet, she faced a lot of jealousy from Lady Aisha. Aisha was envious of Lady Khadija. Terribly envious. I don't mean to offend anybody. And as a result, she was envious of Lady Fatima. And she would always say that I have not been envious of anybody but for Khadija. Because even after her demise, the Prophet married me after 3 or 4 years, he would always talk about her. He would always slaughter animals and give its meat to Lady Khadija's friends. So once Lady Fatima was crying and the Prophet said, what brings tears to you? And she said, look what Aisha is telling me, that your mother was this and that. And the Prophet said, Allah has made you sterile, Aisha. He gave me Tahir, Qasim and Fatima from Khadija. He had given her a house next to one of Lady Maryam and Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh. This is how forceful the Prophet was when it came to Lady Khadija. But in any case, Bibi Fatima faced a lot of envy from Lady Aisha. A lot of envy, an undue envy. Because first and foremost, she didn't bear any children, and secondly, the Prophet's love for Lady Khadija and Bibi Fatima was so great. And the other thing is that the Prophet would overtly love Bibi Fatima. He would be sitting next to her, he would be smelling her fragrance, he would be embracing her, he would be kissing her, and they would say, why? And he would say that this is a gift from paradise for me. To the extent that Bibi Aisha says that in the women, there was no one dearer to the Prophet than Fatima. And in the men, there was no one dearer to the Prophet than Ali ibn Abi Talib. And Aisha says that I have heard the Prophet, and she gives 2 accounts, saying that Fatima Sayyidatun Nisa al-Alameen, that Fatima is the Sayyida of all the women in her time. And in another account, Aisha says that the Prophet said Fatima is the queen of all women from the beginning of creation till the end. That this is the rank of Lady Fatima. Now we know about her spirituality, we know about her spiritual lessons, but what we really don't know is her courage and her resolve. I made this comment in the beginning, that the Prophet called her his mother. I don't feel he called her his mother only because she nursed him, she cleansed his wounds. I think he called her his mother because she would resolve, in a very resolute manner, spur him on. Because if we study her personality and what transpired after the death of the Prophet, we will see that this was the great characteristic of Lady Fatima, that she would not stand defiant. She would not stand in defeat, she would stand defiant in the face of all aggression. She could not admit to defeat. This is how resilient this noble lady was. And I think the Prophet called her his mother because she would always tell the Prophet, don't be defeated. Don't feel defeated. Go and do what you have to do. Similarly with Ali ibn Abi Talib, we find that she would always tell him, it's your right, fight for it, get it back. In any case, what happens is that after the demise of the Prophet, and a big blunder was made in Saqifa, massive blunder was made in Saqifa. However, it needs to be pointed out that Saqifa was not convened by Abu Bakr and Umar. It was already in place by the Ansar. Abu Bakr, Umar, and one another companion, they went there and they attended. However, it can be said that the only reason that the Ansar gathered in Saqifa was because they knew that the Quraysh did not want to give the Khilafah to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Their excuse was that the Nabuwah and Khilafah cannot be in the same household. Because they already had surmised their intentions, that's why they were in Saqifa. In any case, in the house of Lady Fatima would be gathered Imam Ali and some of the noble companions. And amongst them was Zubair as well. Several attempts were made to come to the house and to get them out to come and pledge allegiance. But they would not come out. And at that point, Umar said, we will burn the house down. So somebody said, Fatima is in there. He said, so what? He said, so what? Now what transpires after that, the history is very, very unclear. We don't know. Yes? We really don't know what happens after that. But we do know this much, that when they tried to raid the house, whether there was a door or just a curtain, because Abu Bakr at the end of his life was saying, Ya laytani lam akshuf an Bayt Fatima, if only I had not uncovered the house of Fatima to mean that there was a curtain or something like that. In any case, what happens is that Zubair comes out and he falls, and Imam Ali is taken. But Bibi Fatima here stands very, very, very defiant, and she follows Imam Ali to the mosque, and she says to Abu Bakr, do you want to make the daughter of the Prophet a widow by killing him? In any case, we find a report in which Abu Bakr then says to Imam Ali that no, I will not do anything to you, and I don't have any concern, because he sees at this point that how defiant Lady Fatima is. She's extremely defiant, and he is frightened by this. And because she's extremely eloquent as well. So then what happens is the incident of Fadak. Now, I'm all for, harmony between Sunnis and Shias, but I also feel that if we were to, in an unoffending manner, a very objective manner, talk about history, it can only serve to unite the Shias and the Sunnis by dispelling misconceptions. If we can put the Prophet and his family right there where they belong, that everybody says, look, no matter what you are, who you are, this is where they belong. Yes? That the Ashabul Kisa, as Lady Aisha says, are these 5. In Mubahala, it was these 5. These are the Abna, Nisa, and Nafs of the Prophet. We can all agree that these are the 5. They are morally excellent and spiritually untouchable. These are the ones that we all want to follow. And we then discuss history in an objective manner without trying to offend anybody. But what has happened has happened. And Khalifa Abu Bakr has made the biggest blunder that anybody could make. And Khalifa Umar, unfortunately, has supported him in this massive blunder. In any case, Fadak is emptied of the people who are looking after it, and the Khalifa seizes control of it. The reason for this is, we find afterwards, that when Abu Bakr says that yes, I will give back Fadak to Lady Fatima after her eloquent khutbah in his court, which I will narrate in a little while, Umar said, and what if the Arabs were to attack the Khalifa? How will you sustain the Muslims? This is the only source of revenue. Take it back, and therefore Abu Bakr is deterred from giving it back. In any case, when the Prophet got Fadak, it's a verse of the Quran, right? That whatever we have given to a Prophet without cavalry and camelry is his, specifically his. It belongs to nobody else. And we have narrations that he gifted it to his daughter Fatima. And we also have this notion that it was inherited by her because she was the only heir at that point. Yes? Now on that note, I just want to digress a little. when Imam Hassan, Salamullah alayhi, was being taken to be buried, Bibi Aisha comes and she says, "You will not bury him in my house." Imam Hussain says to her, "You've already buried other than what you're supposed to in the house of the Prophet." Because if you look at it, the house of the Prophet was the inheritance of his daughter. And 1/10 of it goes to his wives to be shared amongst each other. And one of the wives has given 2 graves to Khalifa number 1 and Khalifa Thani, the first Khalifa and the second Khalifa. What right did she have? It wasn't her inheritance. It wasn't Lady Aisha's inheritance. That house belongs to Bibi Fatima in inheritance, right? So this just highlights the blunder that Abu Bakr is making here. So when Lady Fatima goes to him, Abu Bakr says, Khalifa Abu Bakr, نحن معاشر الأنبياء لا نرث ولا نورث. We, the group of Anbiya, we do not inherit and we do not give in inheritance. Yes? So here Lady Fatima in her eloquent khutbah, in one place she says, وَوَرِثَ Sulaymanu Dawood. Sulaiman has inherited Dawood. Are you saying that my father was inconsistent with the book of God? And we all know as jurists that a hadith cannot stand against a clear verse of the Quran. So she made her argument there that look, what you're saying is absolutely inconsistent. Now Mufti Farooq of Birmingham, one of the great sort of personalities we have in Birmingham, he's head of quite a few Muslims in Sparkhill Mosque. His article states that if the actions of first Khalifa and second Khalifa are accurate, that the first Khalifa and the second Khalifa said, look, whatever the Prophet leaves, it's for the Muslims. So Fadak belongs to the Muslims, yes? Whatever their motivation was, this was the justification. Their motivation for taking Fadak, I know, and we're going to discuss it in a little while, which we assume were the motives. But their justification was that Fadak belongs to the Muslims at large. The third Khalifa Uthman, he took up office on the pledge that he will act in accordance with the Book of God, the Sunnah of the Prophet, and the Sunnah of the Shaykh. He took Fadak from the hands of the Muslims and gave it to his son-in-law Marwan bin Hakam. So now, is the Khalifa third one right or the first 2 Khalifa right? He asks this. Then Muawiyah takes it from Marwan bin Hakam and splits it into 3. Gives 1/3 to Marwan, 1/3 to Yazid, and 1/3 to the son of Khalifa Uthman. So now who is right here? Then Marwan becomes a Khalifa again. Yazid's son, Muawiyah, who was the lover of Ahlul Bayt, obviously, he abdicated, and we assume he was killed and poisoned to death. In any case, when Marwan comes, he takes it all back. Then Abdul Aziz has it all. Then Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, may Allah bless his soul, one of the most righteous people we've ever seen, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he gives it back to Ahlul Bayt. Of course, he brings a court of ulama and says, decide, was Khalifa Abu Bakr and Khalifa Umar right or wrong? And they said they were wrong. It belongs to Fatima Salamullah alayha, and it should be given back to the sons of Fatima. So now we ask here, if Abu Bakr and Umar were right, then Uthman was wrong. If Uthman was right, then Abu Bakr and Umar were wrong. If Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was right and the ulama, then all of them are wrong, and Bibi Fatima was right. In any case, their motivation here seems to be only one. Their motivation was, and some people like Ibn Abdul Hadid, Al-Mu'tazili, he asks his teacher that was Fatima right and was Abu Bakr wrong? He said yes. He said Bibi Fatima was right, Abu Bakr was wrong. As I said, I don't mean any disrespect to anybody, yes? She said, then why didn't Khalifa give Lady Fatima the Fadak garden back? He said, because she was so forceful and resilient that had Abu Bakr conceded in Fadak, he would have to concede in the right of her husband as well. because she was not going to back off. She would have said, now that you have proven yourself to be wrong in your judgment, the Khilafah belongs to Ali ibn Abi Talib. And in her sermon, not in her sermon, but in her message to the women of Medina, she emphatically talks about this. That the right of Ali has been usurped. And he would have been one who would have guided them without any desire of usurping any wealth of the Muslim government. And would have been the most righteous person. So they said he was fearful that if he were to concede to her in Fadak, he would have had to concede to her elsewhere as well. But we feel that they actually felt. Now, if you look at Banu Abbas as well, giving and taking and giving and taking, and we find that Banu Abbas as well, they were always fearful that these Imams of the Ahlul Bayt will gain superiority over them by mobilizing their forces through wealth. And hence they would always snatch this economic power base away from them. And after the, obviously, Ma'mun and others, no mention of Fadak is made in history. In any case, Lady Fatima is extremely offended, extremely offended. As I said, I do not know what happened. It's not very clear to me from history. But for somebody to die at the age of 18 asks a question, isn't it? How can somebody die at the age of 18? And that khutbah of Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayhi, which I think we find in Nahjul Balagha, in which he says, I give her back to you, O Habib, to the Prophet, in a state in which she is wounded. Well, what does that mean? Something surely has happened. But we don't have a clear picture of what has happened. Now, Lady Fatima is extremely offended. In her khutbah, she imprecates Abu Bakr. She imprecates the people in the court for forgetting the ways that the Prophet had taught them. She said, he brought you out of indignity to levels of dignity. He brought you out of poverty into affluence. He brought you out of Jahiliyyah into the unity of God. He brought you out of indignity to such a noble stature that you enjoy now, from insecurity to security and safety. And this is the way you have forgotten him. And at every instance, the khutbah is flowing with utmost eloquency, in which she is giving historical facts, taunting them, and the Quran is interwoven all together. It's a phenomenal khutbah that's extempore and delivered without preparation. Abu Bakr engages in a conversation with her after that, and she dismantles the whole argument. She returns to her home and she's extremely saddened, extremely hurt. The fact that her house could be transgressed upon, the fact that they could actually congregate outside her house. And she says to Umar that, will you set alight the house of Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad? And he says, yes, for the greater good I can. This offends her to no extent. Later on, Umar, according to the saying, said, well, I did not set it alight. Yes? But to even say that to the Prophet's daughter and to go to her house in that threatening manner in itself is unforgivable. And then to force Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayhi to stand in front of Abu Bakr when we all know where the truth lies. These are the things that are offending her, the hurt of it all. Now, for a noble person, shamatatul a'da, this is what we told. The insults are the biggest killers. She felt insulted. She felt damaged and hurt. Apart from the physical wound that we find Ali ibn Abi Talib talking about, she has a wound in her heart that is not healing. She is extremely bitter. Now Bukhari narrates that Bibi Fatima said, I will not talk to these two people so long as I am alive. And I will go to Allah and I will complain against them. The women of Medina go to Lady Fatima and she explains the whole event. They go and say to her, to their men, Their men come and they said, "Oh lady, if we had known all of this, we would have never have congregated in Saqifa. We would have never ever been coerced into giving bay'ah to Abu Bakr." And of course, there was no ijma. By the way, there was fighting and punching and kicking going on in Saqifa, and that's the fact. Yes. In any case, they said, "But it's too late. We've already done it." She again talked about her grief and her hurt and the insult that she has felt and what Abu Bakr and Umar have done. Now Abu Bakr begins to cry. And he says, "No, I can't have this." So he finds then that Lady Fatima has become unwell. Very, very unwell. And of course, Imam Ali already knows that Lady Fatima has told him that she will be the first one to meet with the Prophet. Whatever the case, Abu Bakr and Umar come to her house. She refuses to see them on 3 occasions. Then they go to Imam Ali. And they say, Abu Bakr starts wailing and crying. He says, "I will not go into a house until I see Fatima." So he goes to Imam Ali, Umar, and he says, "Look, Abu Bakr is standing outside in the cold. He refuses to enter into a house, any house, until he sees Lady Fatima." So Imam Ali said, "I will seek permission from her." He goes to Bibi Fatima and he says, "They have come to see you." And she says, "But I do not want them to see me." He said, "But I have already assured them that I will ask you in a favorable manner." She said, "In that case, you have a prior right, then send them in." When they came in, this is how it's narrated. They stood in front of her, she turned her face. They went to another direction, she turned her face. They went to another direction, and she refused to talk with them. She said, "Oh Ali, cover my face." He did. And then they stood in front of her. And then she said to them, "Do you remember an incident in which the Prophet said that Fatima is a part of me, and he who offends her offends me?" They said, "Yes." They said, "Do you remember?" She said, "Do you remember that he said, whoever offends her in my life is the same as the one who offends her after my death? Whoever offends her has offended me, and whoever offends me has offended God." They said, "Yes." He said, "By God, you have both offended me. And I will not talk with you until I meet with my father and I complain against you in front of God." And Abu Bakr burst out crying at that point. And she said, "I have not forgiven you, and I will not forgive you." Now this is narrated in our books and their books. This is the state in which these 2 men have left her. This is not something easy, it is something huge. This is not only the daughter of the Prophet, but she has brought out a decisive argument that I will complain against you in front of my father, in front of God. This is not something easy. I think we all need to understand this, yes? Whatever good anybody does after that, whatever bad anybody does after that, but this is something that has happened there. There you go. And it is not something that is easy to swallow and to digest, no matter how much anybody is venerated. Janab Zahra summons Imam Ali, and he sees her working. He says, "You're in no state to work." She says, "But this is my last day." "How do you know this is your last day?" "I saw my father, and he said, on this day shall you meet with me. I want to clean this house. I want to bathe my children. I want to dress them." Ali, you are a man with a very soft soul. Marry such and such after my death, for she is closest to me and will look after my children as I look after them. Imam Ali embraces her and he begins to weep out aloud and cry. And she embraces him and she weeps. But you can see the stature of Fatima. She says to Imam Ali, "O Abul Hassan, now leave me. take the children to the grave of their grandfather. She takes a ghusl, wears clean clothes, and she says to Asma, call me after a little while. If I do not answer, then I have left this world. She goes in her own chamber and she's doing the dhikr of Allah. After a while, Asma feels silence from the room. She says, "Oh Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad." There is no answer. She says, "Oh Fatima, the queen of all women." There is no answer. She says, "Oh Fatima, the wife of Ali. Oh Fatima, the mother of the youths of paradise." At that point, Asma comes into the room and she finds Lady Fatima silent. She wails and cries. She calls for Ali ibn Abi Talib. She calls for Hussain and Hussain. They weep out aloud. Imam Ali, in accordance with the wasiyah of Lady Fatima, she had said, "Oh Ali, I do not wish these men to pray my janazah, nor to witness my burial." He washes her at night. We find narrations that this mountain of resolve bursts out crying and weeping. They ask him, "Why do you cry?" "I found her wounded." At night, her body is carried. We are told that Ali and the close companions, Al-Hassan, Al-Hussein, Lady Fatima, Lady Zainab, Lady Umm Kulthum, Salman, Miqdad, Abu Dhar, the close companions. Imam Ali opens the grave, lays her to rest, and says, "Oh dear brother, I give back your trust to you." In a state in which she is wounded, "Oh Muhammad, ask of her the details of what has transpired upon us." She often exclaimed, "Oh Father, after you, such sorrows have befallen us. Were they to befall bright days, they would be turned into darkest nights." Then Ali ibn Abi Talib digs several graves in Baqi. The next day, they hear that Fatima has left this world. They run. They find she's already buried. They find 4 graves. The people are mounting a rebellion against the Khalifa for letting Fatima die in a state that she is so offended that they did not get a chance to pray for her. There is a decree that you may remove the dust to find which grave she's buried in. I read that Ali ibn Abi Talib at this point puts his armor on and unsheathes his sword. He said, "If anybody were to remove a speck of dust, I will cover Medina with your blood." Abu Bakr says to Imam Ali, "Let us go. We will not do anything." I will say, "Oh Fatima, this was a prelude to what is to happen. Maybe this was a preparation your daughter needed. When your house was threatened to be burned, Zainab's house was burned. Oh Fatima, if you are buried in the darkness of the night, then observe what Zainab and Umm Kulthum are seeing in Karbala. From afar, they see a body. Umm Kulthum turns inadvertently towards Medina and says, "Wa Jadda," oh grandfather. "The angels bless you. Is this not your son Hussain, who you used to carry upon your shoulders, whose lips you used to adorn with your kisses? See how he lies without a head. His body torn into pieces, his ghusl being given by his flowing blood, and his shroud by the dust that is thrown upon his body. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ما تنحصي.